The air was heavy with the hum of weekend shoppers. As Aaron stepped out of the bustling mall, a bag of new shirts swinging loosely in his hand. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the sunlight felt warm on the skin, but the air carried a bite of cold. People passed him in hurried strides, their conversations blending into the background noise. He had just finished browsing for hours, trying to distract himself from the gnawing emptiness that had lingered in him for months. His life had become a series of routines. Work, gym, eat, sleep, repeat. The spark that once lit up his days had faded, and no matter how he tried, it never returned. As he reached the edge of the parking lot, something caught his attention. A small figure sitting cross-legged by the entrance, clutching a tattered blanket. At first, Aaron barely looked. Beggars were not uncommon in the city, and he often tried not to make eye contact. Not out of cruelty, but out of that helpless feeling of not being able to fix every problem he saw. But there was something about this one, about the way she sat so still, her face hidden under the shadow of a worn hoodie, that made him slow his steps. Her posture wasn't like most he had seen on the streets. There was no cardboard sign, no hand stretched out, no desperate call for help. She simply sat there, almost invisible, as if she had given up the effort to be noticed. The crowd moved around her without pause, yet something pulled Aaron's gaze back to her. He didn't know why, but he felt the oddest twist in his stomach, like a memory trying to resurface. He told himself to keep walking, but then the breeze shifted, lifting the edge of her hood, just enough for sunlight to touch her cheek. His breath caught in his throat. That face, pale, delicate, and unmistakable, was one he knew, one he had memorized long ago. It was her. The realization hit him like a blow. Years ago, she had been the center of his world, the girl who could make him laugh until his stomach hurt, who knew every secret he'd ever dared to share. She was his best friend, his confidant, his first love. But one morning, she had vanished without warning. No message, no explanation, just gone. He had searched for answers, replayed their last conversation countless times, and even reached out to her friends, but no one could tell him where she went. It had been as if she'd been erased from the world, and now, here she was, on the cold concrete outside a shopping mall, looking nothing like the girl he remembered. Her once bright eyes seemed dimmer, her shoulders hunched, her hands tucked deep into her sleeves as if to hide from the world. The sight sent a rush of emotions through him. Shock, confusion, a pang of hurt, and something else he couldn't name. His first instinct was to call her name, but his voice caught before it could leave his throat. What if she didn't want to see him? What if there was a reason she had left without saying goodbye? What if approaching her would bring back a flood of pain for both of them? He stood frozen, the sounds of the busy mall fading into a dull hum in his ears. A group of teenagers brushed past him, laughing, and one of them accidentally dropped a coin, which rolled and stopped right at the girl's foot. She didn't pick it up. She didn't even move. Instead, she stared at the ground, her hair falling over her face, her body language screaming of someone who had been broken too many times to expect kindness anymore. Aaron felt a weight settle in his chest. He had thought about her so many times over the years, replaying memories of their nights talking under the stars, their shared dreams of traveling the world, their promises that they'd always have each other's backs. And now, standing here, the reality of her life seemed so far from those dreams that it made his heart ache. He tightened his grip on the shopping bag, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to walk away, to let her be, to pretend he hadn't seen her. But another part, the louder part, told him that fate didn't place people in your path for no reason. He took a slow breath, trying to summon the courage to take the first step toward her. Aaron's heart pounded as he slowly approached, each step feeling heavier than the last. The sound of his shoes crunching against the pavement seemed unnaturally loud in his ears, as if the world had gone quiet, just for this moment. He stopped a few feet away, not wanting to startle her. She still hadn't looked up, her gaze fixed on the small patch of ground in front of her, her hands tucked tightly into her sleeves. "Lena," he said softly, his voice barely more than a whisper. For a brief second, he thought he imagined it. The slight flinch of her shoulders, the tiniest shift in her breathing. Slowly, she lifted her head, and their eyes met. Those eyes, he would have recognized them anywhere, even if 1,000 years had passed. But they weren't the same. They no longer held the warmth, the spark, the playful glint he remembered. Instead, they looked guarded, as if every wall she could build around herself had been built high and strong. "Aaron," she breathed, her voice raspy, as though she hadn't spoken much lately. The sound of his name from her lips sent a shiver through him. They stared at each other for what felt like an eternity, neither sure what to say. Finally, he crouched down so they were eye level. "I've been looking for you for years," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Where have you been? What happened?" Lena glanced around nervously, as if afraid someone might overhear. She pulled her hood lower over her face. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured. "It's complicated." "Complicated," he echoed. "You disappeared without a word. I thought you were—" He stopped himself. Saying the word dead felt too heavy, too final. "I didn't know if I'd ever see you again." She looked away, her eyes glistening, though no tears fell. "I had to leave, Aaron. I didn't have a choice." "That's not true," he said gently, but firmly. "There's always a choice." Lena's lips trembled, but she didn't answer right away. The wind picked up, blowing strands of hair across her face. Aaron instinctively reached out to tuck them behind her ear, but she leaned back slightly, as if the touch would burn. It was then he noticed the faint bruise along her jawline, partially hidden by her hair. His chest tightened. "Who did that to you?" he asked, his voice dropping into a low, protective tone. She shook her head quickly. "It doesn't matter. You shouldn't get involved." "It matters to me," he said, his voice breaking just enough for her to hear the truth in it. For the first time, Lena's expression softened. Her eyes flicked to his, and there was the faintest flicker of the girl he used to know. "You were always the one who wanted to fix things," she said, almost with a sad smile. "But some things, some people, can't be fixed." Aaron swallowed hard, fighting the urge to press her for answers. She clearly wasn't ready to give. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. "At least let me help you," he said, holding out a few bills. She hesitated, glancing from the money to his face. I'm not doing this for handouts," she said quietly, her voice laced with pride. "I know," he replied. "It's not charity. It's just me trying to make sure you're okay. Even a little bit." For a moment, it looked like she might take it, but then she pushed his hand away, gently. "If you want to help me, Aaron, walk away. Forget you saw me." His brow furrowed. "I can't do that," Lena sighed, glancing around again, as if expecting someone to appear out of nowhere. The way her body tensed made him uneasy. There was something she wasn't telling him, something bigger than the two of them. Her eyes darted toward the far end of the parking lot, and Aaron followed her gaze, noticing a shadowy figure leaning against a lamppost, watching them. The figure didn't move, but the sight of him seemed to unsettle Lena deeply. Her breathing quickened, and she clutched the edges of her sleeves tightly in her fists. "You need to go," she whispered, urgently. "Now." Aaron turned back to her, torn between obeying her plea and staying to protect her. His instinct screamed that if he left now, he might lose her again, this time for good. But the fear in her eyes was real, and it was enough to make him pause, his mind spinning with questions he couldn't yet answer. Aaron's pulse quickened as he turned his attention back to the shadowed figure at the far end of the lot. The man was still leaning casually against the lamppost, but there was nothing casual about the way he was watching them. His stance was too rigid, his gaze too fixed. Something about him radiated quiet menace, the kind that didn't need words to communicate danger. Lena's breathing grew shallow. "Aaron, please," she urged, her voice low but tense. "You can't be here when he decides to move." Aaron's jaw tightened. "Who is he?" She didn't answer directly, her eyes flicking nervously between Aaron and the figure. "Someone I've been trying to avoid," she muttered. "And he's not alone. If you stay, you'll get dragged into things you can't undo." Her words should have made him back off, but instead they rooted him deeper in place. Lena, I'm not walking away from you again. Not when you clearly need help. Her expression was torn. Half fear, half frustration. You don't understand, she said, shaking her head. There are people who make sure you disappear without a trace. If you get in their way, people who won't care that you were just trying to help. Aaron took a slow breath, his mind working through possibilities. Then let's get you somewhere safe. Right now. We can talk later. She let out a bitter laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Safe? There's no such thing for me anymore. Before he could respond, the man by the lamppost shifted his weight, straightened, and began walking toward them with deliberate slowness. Every step felt like a clock ticking down. Lena stiffened, her hands curling into fists inside her sleeves. Aaron stepped instinctively between her and the approaching figure. Stay behind me, he said firmly. The man stopped, just a few feet away. He was taller than Aaron, his build solid, his face partially shadowed by the overhead light. There was a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, the kind that carried no humor. Didn't think I'd find you here, Lena, he said smoothly, his voice laced with mockery. Lena's reply was sharp, though her voice wavered. Leave me alone, Mark. Aaron felt a jolt at the name. He didn't know who this Mark was, but the way Lena's shoulders hunched told him enough. This man was trouble. Mark's eyes flicked to Aaron, sizing him up. And who's this? Your knight in shining armor? Aaron didn't flinch under the scrutiny. I'm a friend, he said evenly. And I think you should walk away. Mark chuckled darkly. You've got guts. I'll give you that. But you have no idea what you're stepping into. Lena's hand tugged at Aaron's sleeve, urgently, as if begging him not to provoke the situation further. But Aaron's stance didn't waver. Then enlighten me, he said. Mark's smirk faded into something colder. This isn't about you, so you should keep it that way. Lena owes people, and debts get collected one way or another. Aaron's mind raced. Debts. That explained some of her evasiveness, but not all. He glanced back at Lena, who was looking at the ground now, shame and fear mingling in her expression. I told you, she murmured under her breath. There's no getting out of this. Aaron turned back to Mark. If she owes something, I can... No, Lena cut in sharply, her eyes wide. Aaron, you can't. That's not how it works. Mark tilted his head, clearly amused by the exchange. Listen to the girl, he said. She's smarter than you think. The tension between the three of them thickened, heavy and unyielding. Aaron could feel the weight of choices pressing down on him, each one more dangerous than the last. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine revved, and headlights briefly swept across the lot, casting long, distorted shadows. Mark's gaze never left Aaron's, as though challenging him to make the next move. Lena, still hovering just behind him, whispered something so faint he almost didn't hear it. Please, don't make this worse. Aaron clenched his fists at his sides, his mind torn between the urge to stand his ground and the need to get her out of this situation. The cold night air bit against his skin, but it was nothing compared to the chills settling deep in his gut, as he realized just how far this might go if he didn't choose carefully. Mark's smirk deepened, as though he had already won whatever silent battle was playing out. He stepped closer, the scent of cigarette smoke clinging to him, his shadow stretching over both of them. You have one chance to walk away, hero, he said, his voice low and dangerous. This is between me and her. Aaron's eyes narrowed. The moment you made it about intimidation, it became my business. Lena's hand gripped Aaron's arm tighter, trembling. Aaron, please, just go. He's not bluffing, but Aaron didn't move. He couldn't, not when Lena looked so cornered, so utterly worn down. The memory of the night she left without a goodbye flashed in his mind. How helpless he had felt then, unable to stop her from vanishing. He had promised himself, silently, that if he ever saw her again, he wouldn't let her face anything alone. Mark tilted his head, studying Aaron, with something almost like curiosity. You're either really brave, he said slowly, or really stupid. Aaron didn't break eye contact. Maybe both. But I'm not letting you touch her. The tension stretched so tight, It felt like a single wrong word would snap it into violence. Then in a sudden burst, Mark reached for Lena's wrist. Aaron's reflexes kicked in. He stepped forward, blocking Mark's hand with a sharp shove. "Wrong move," Mark hissed, before the situation could spiral. Headlights swept into the lot again. Only this time the vehicle didn't pass by. It pulled in sharply, tires crunching against gravel, and came to a stop. Just a few feet away, two uniformed police officers stepped out, their flashlights slicing through the dark. "Evening," one officer said. His tone clipped, but authoritative. "We got a report of a disturbance. Everyone stay right where you are." Mark's easy arrogance faltered for the first time, though he tried to cover it with a scoff. "This is just a conversation. Doesn't look like it from here," the second officer replied, his gaze moving between the three of them. Aaron stepped back slightly, letting the light fall on Lena. She looked pale and shaken, her eyes darting nervously between Mark and the officers. "Miss," one of the officers asked gently, "is this man bothering you?" There was a pause, a long, heavy pause, and then Lena nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, he's been following me." Mark glared at her, his expression twisting into something venomous, but the officers moved in immediately, positioning themselves between him and Lena. "Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands where I can see them," the first officer ordered. "This is ridiculous," Mark muttered, but he complied, the click of handcuffs punctuating the moment. As the officers led him toward their car, one of them paused to address Aaron. "Thanks for stepping in, but in the future, call us sooner. Could have been dangerous." Aaron nodded. "I understand. Just didn't want her to get hurt." When they were alone, Lena sank onto the curb, her shoulders sagging as though a weight had finally been lifted, at least for now. Aaron sat beside her, unsure if she would welcome his presence or push him away again. "I told you to leave," she murmured after a long silence. "I know," Aaron replied softly, "but I couldn't." Her eyes glistened in the dim light, the guarded mask she'd worn for so long, cracking just a little. "You shouldn't get involved in my mess. It's not fair to you." Aaron shook his head. "Fair or not, I made my choice. I'm not losing you again." For a moment, she just stared at him, as if trying to read the sincerity in his words. Then, with a shaky breath, she said, "You have no idea how many times I wished someone would say that to me." Aaron managed a small smile. "Then maybe this time, you'll stay and let me prove I mean it." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't walk away either. And for Aaron, that was enough, for now. The past had finally caught up to them, but maybe, just maybe, the future could be different.